that's coming on first with us for our new adventure. We're going to be doing these every Wednesday night at 4:00 with Vets I Recommend. And so the first veterinarian that is kind of starting us off is Dr. Jean Dodds. Dr. Dodds, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carrie.
So I'm so excited. I've told this story before about how I first learned of Dr. Dodds, and that was many years ago. And I just mean I'm aging myself, but it was back when I was in college, and I was doing a speech for the speech and debate team on blood donations for my cat is playing in a box right now, which, what a surprise. Carrie left a box out, and she wonders why the cat's playing in it. So when I was doing this speech, it was on blood donations. And so I had to seek out, of course, information in order for this speech to be great. And lo and behold, I found out that right here in Garden Grove, I was living in Anaheim at the time, but right in Garden Grove was a place where they actually took greyhounds and got blood donations from them. And I learned so much about that. And I decided to call. This is why I love this story so much, because you don't expect to get this brilliant person that just answers the phone. And so I expected to get a receptionist or something. And I called and I said, hi, I just would like to speak with, I think I was like 18 at the time. Can I speak with Dr. Jean Dodds? And she says, this is her. This is she. And we talked for a while, and I don't expect you to remember that, and who would, but I ended up winning that speech, and a lot of it had to do with the stuff that I learned from you about blood donations in dogs. And so that was my first time learning about the veterinarian that I brought on for all of you. And then as I grew more and more into my holistic mindset as far as how animals should be treated, I came across Dr. Jean Dodds again. Of course, I started learning about, are we over vaccinating our dogs? And I learned about the Rabies Challenge Fund. So Dr. Dodds, I'm really want to hear a little bit about the Rabies Challenge Fund, because I don't think people are really aware of how hard of a fight it was to get our dogs they used to have to get that rabies once a year. And they got it once a year forever. So can you tell us a little bit about why you started that and how it became where it is today?
Well, as you mentioned, I started out my career as basically a hematologist and immunologist. And we took care of animals that were born with inherited bleeding diseases like hemophilia. And so we had to learn how to take care of them. And one of the things we didn't want to do was to give them anything that would affect their bleeding potential. And vaccines can do that because they reduce the platelet count, those little cells that stick together and help seal the surface of blood vessels, so they don't bleed. And it occurs from day 3 to about day 14. So we had to be really careful if these animals needed vaccinations, what to do. So why was rabies so important? Well, first of all, it's a fatal disease, basically, of all mammals. But it's also the vaccine that causes more adverse vaccine reactions than any others in pets, and also it does in people. And the reactions are called vaccinosis. Now, what happens is the reactions from rabies vaccines are more severe if the vaccine also contained mercury. And that's the thimerosal salt of mercury that's put into vaccines as a preservative. Well, what happens when the mercury's in there as well? You've got the secondary effects of the heavy metal, okay? Aluminum, the same thing, and other things. And so the question was, how can we produce safer rabies vaccines? And how long do they actually last? In other words, how long do they give protective antibodies? It's the same issue we're dealing with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19 today. How long do exposures or vaccinations last, and do you need boosters? And what we found out in the Rabies Challenge Fund, which we did all over the world, and we actually had the idea that we would try to extend the duration of immunity to 5 and even 7 years. So we developed with Dr. Ron Schultz and Dr. Lori and Lori Larson, and Chris Christine, was this fund. And we collected money from individual donations, $10 to $1,000 to kennel clubs that gave us $10,000. There was no money from industry or anybody to influence us in any way. And then we did the study and we found that the current rabies vaccines last 5 years. Now, not 1 year and not 3 years as they're currently licensed for, but 5 years. So the question is, why didn't we go beyond 5 years?
Yeah.
Well, the animals that we had in our study were healthy still, and they were 6 years from, they only had 2 rabies vaccines 3 to 4 weeks apart as puppies, nothing after that. Well, we couldn't do it any longer because the only source of live rabies virus for challenge in the United States is the USDA, and they didn't have any. So we couldn't continue our study anymore because we had no virus to challenge them to show if it would go beyond 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, whatever.
Wow.
And we got 88% protection to challenge at 5 years. And by the way, you'll probably be astounded to know that to have a licensed rabies vaccine, now this is a fatal disease of all mammals, okay? You only have to have 80% protection.
Wow.
The current licensed rabies vaccines go through the same trial study that we did. We matched exactly what the USDA required, but we got 88%. And what will the USDA ever extend the duration of immunity of the vaccines to 5 years? Well, we would love that. But as people ask me, well, why don't they, Jean? I said, but you've got to understand the USDA has much more serious things to worry about right now than worry about changing the regulations for rabies vaccines. I mean, we've got pandemics, we've got avian influenza, the highly virulent one has just been identified in a turkey flock in Indiana. It can infect people. It hasn't yet, and hopefully it won't. But we've got lots of serious things in public health that the USDA has to concentrate on right now. So I understand that.
But we know that your studies were able to go 88% for 5 years.
Years, correct.
And what they, and other than the vaccines only cover 80, you're saying 80% is what is needed.
No, they can be more than that. But to be licensed, you only have to have 80. Yes, it's a bit, well, nothing is perfect, okay?
Right.
So, and you know what happened is when we had these lovely beagles and they were all females, and when the study was finished after the 6 years of time, there were 35 beagles left over. So the dean of the veterinary school and the farm where the animals came from, which was run by veterinarians, they didn't want them anymore. They just wanted to kill them. And we said, wait a minute. Wow. We own those dogs.
Yeah.
We own beagles. Well, they're not spayed. Who's going to want an unspayed 6.5-year-old beagle? I said, let us decide that.
Yeah.
So the Rabies Challenge Fund paid to have 34 of the 35 females shipped to us. They couldn't find the 35th one. Eventually they did, and they sent it to us by air. We had them all walking on leashes as volunteers from our area came. Carrie, we were so proud, and we had them paid and in homes within 30 days.
That's amazing, because you and I both know that these beagles don't always get that kind of a end in research. We use the researchers in veterinary medicine often use beagles, right?
Yes, they're very popular, and there are many beagle producers that use beagles for biomedical research. And when these animals came, they were frightened. They weren't sure. They would sit in their large kennels we put them in at the back, and within a few days they were jumping and playing and running together in an X-pen outside Hemopet, and it was just so heartwarming.
It's so amazing, because I've heard so many horror stories, these poor beagles. I've even seen some. I have a guy right down the way from where my business is, and he rescued a beagle from some pretty horrid situations. And he's you could see the after effects, but the gentleman's working with him really well. And so things are starting to happen, but they don't always end up in homes. And sometimes they live their life out in these horrible situations. So I'm glad to hear the happy ending, that you found homes for everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. So there's a few people coming in. So I just want to take a quick moment and say hi to everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad that you're finding your way in here. I decided to do this because every single day, and I'm not exaggerating even a tiny bit, people ask me what vets I recommend. Do you have a vet that you recommend? They always ask me that. And it's interesting because a lot of times people recommend vets just because they went there with their dog, which is fair. They went there with their dog. They like the veterinarian. But what I want people to know is kind of why I recommend veterinarians, why they become somebody that I recommend. I shared earlier when we first came on about how long I've known of Dr. Dodds, and she happens to be in Garden Grove, so she's very close to me, which a lot of the veterinarians, as you continue to watch this show, aren't always local to me. But that doesn't mean that I don't think they're great. But a couple of reasons what makes me pick the vets that will be on this show as we continue is I do look for holistic veterinarians, but I think it's important for people to know that I don't only recommend veterinarians that are holistic. I have in the past recommended a veterinarian that was not holistic, actually 2 I can think of. And that was because their integrity was so on point. And even though they didn't necessarily believe in certain parts of holistic, I knew that they wouldn't lie to their clients. And I'm hoping that I'm educating people enough to make their own holistic decisions. And so if they have a good vet, they trust that. So that's one thing I want you to know. I remember asking Dr. Dodds a while back, do you sell flea and tick medication? What was your answer, Dr. Dodds?
No, we do not sell anything.
Yeah.
We do diagnostic testing, and the only thing that we do sell that we just started with is our super supplement that we can talk about later.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that. So when I'm choosing veterinarians and I'm looking for a holistic veterinarian, that is one of the questions I ask vets: do they sell flea and tick medication? And the reason why is because it's a guide for me. If I have, because there's a lot of veterinarians that will say they're holistic, and I don't think they're even in the ballpark of holistic. And so that it doesn't mean I won't recommend a veterinarian that sells it, but I want to know, how are you selling? Is it something that you insist all your dogs that come in instantly get put on? Or do you have it in the back if you have a flea infestation and you've tried everything else and nothing will work? So that's one thing. And I remember asking Dr. Jean Dodds if she sold it. How come you don't recommend it either, right?
Well, first of all, I'm a published author now on scientific studies that have looked at the safety of the newer flea and tick medications, and we've just had a second paper published on that. And clearly, there are severe adverse reactions. And what happened is these are some of the biggest money makers in veterinary medicine right now for the big pharma. And so what's happened is the adverse reactions were not written on the label. So what happened first was there are 2 class action lawsuits about these right now, one in Quebec and one in New Jersey. There's over 2,000 people at wrongful death and suffering, pain and suffering in Canada, and over 4,000 in America. And what happened was one of the companies said, well, we don't sell that much in Canada because it's a smaller country, being my former country. So we'll put the warnings on the label. But we're not going to put it on the American label until we've sold our 250 million remaining doses or whatever. So now the adverse reaction rates are required. Finally, the FDA took a very strong stance after months and months. Well, we know why that is. They're busy. So the warning is on the label. Part of the problem is it can be sometimes on the bottom of the advertisement in such tiny font, you can't read it without a magnifying glass.
Right.
So please be very, very careful. And if any of the listeners want to have the published reports about the potential adverse reaction rates of all these new products, I'll be happy to send them.
Thank you. Yeah. If you send them to us, Lori, we can get people learning a little bit about it. One of the problem I find a lot with flea and tick medication is even if you purchase the box, sometimes they don't give you the box. Sometimes your vet just gives you the pill right while your dog is there. So you haven't even had access to the insert at all. You just go in, your dog has fleas, and the vet says, oh, I'll just give you the pill right here, or give you the shot, or give you whatever. So it's not even whether or not you can find the adverse reactions on it. It's whether or not it was handed to you and you even have access to it. So, but that is one question I always ask vets if I'm going to recommend, how do they feel about flea and tick? And the reason why I'm so adamant, there's a couple reasons that I'm adamant about flea and tick medication is, one, I am fairly certain that my dog died from flea and tick medication when it first came out many, many years ago. Most people know I was a vet tech. I was working for a vet, and flea and tick stuff came on the market. Dr. Dodds can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to guesstimate that it was around the late 80s that we started seeing Frontline and Advantage, the stuff you put on their back. You think that's right, around that time? Yeah. And so there was nothing prior to that. You just had to bathe your dog and pick the fleas off or whatever. But this new thing came out. And so I was a vet tech at the time. So of course I was putting it all over my dog. And then my little dachshund started having seizures, and they never were able to find out what was wrong with her. Never, never, never. And I kept putting that on once a month because I was told by the drug companies that it was safe. And ultimately I had to put her down because the seizures got so bad. So that is one reason, is I just feel like my own pet died from it. But also I think that any veterinarian at this time that doesn't know that this stuff has serious side effects is not continuing their education. And so I can't refer a vet who I don't think is continuing. And so that was one of the questions I always ask vets that I recommend if they sell flea or tick medication. And I'll listen if they have a good reason to. But I have a question from Thomas Clark asks a question, if we could clarify what a holistic veterinarian is. I don't know if you have a good definition of that, Dr. Dodds.
A holistic veterinarian is someone, or physician, is someone who practices holism with a W. In other words, you look at all things that affect the well-being of an individual, human or animal, and you apply alternate things in addition to classical surgery or medicine or laboratory testing. You supply other modalities like herbal therapy, diet change, acupuncture, acupressure, chiropractic, those Reiki, massage therapy. All these kinds of therapies are adjunctive health for health. And we all use them if you think about it. Yeah. It's nothing unusual. So if you're a holistic veterinarian and proud to call yourself one, as I am, you're looking at everything in the body, not just the classical things we learned in veterinary school or in our continuing education. And by the way, in relation to the flea and tick things, one of the things that's really awful about it is the major side effects, other than leaky gut, are aggression, unprovoked, or seizures. And I can't tell you how many large breed dogs are put to sleep or are about to be put to sleep because they've suddenly started biting their pet caregiver. And
is that did you say from the rabies or from the flea and tick?
No, from the flea and tick.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. That's what the major side effects are.
I did not. I mean, I know about the seizures, but I didn't know aggression.
Oh, no, unprovoked aggression. Absolutely. And in fact, I can tell you in our Hemopet Holistic Care Clinic, where we have 3 veterinarians working in the facility along with myself, helping them. We have so many people that come from the Southern California area to see us for holistic care, and they're on one of these products. Now, in April 17 last year, the FDA made a list of the ones that are commonly used, when they were first introduced to the market, and how many adverse reactions and death have been reported. How many adverse reactions and how many deaths have been reported. And I don't even want to tell you, one of our major veterinary magazines, the back cover, full page color ad is one of these right now. And it says, one and you're done. Yeah, and you know what the done is? It can be death, okay?
I know.
So I'm not making any excuses for this anymore. I'm absolutely dismayed.
See, that's how I feel about it, because when I left the veterinary world and I opened up my holistic boarding and daycare place, I had all these dogs coming in and they were all seizures, like all these dogs with seizures. I'm like, what is happening? And so I just started asking, does your dog take flea and tick medication? Because it was just a hunch that I had with my own dog in trying to figure out what the heck happened. And it was all these dogs. Yes, yes, yes. Now, obviously, and I know that's not a scientific study, but it was an observation.
Sorry. The other thing that nobody remembers is that neurotoxic herbs are in most of the commercial pet foods. That's rosemary, oregano, fennel, and sage. And people, when you call the technical people at the company, say, oh, well, it's such a small amount, it couldn't possibly do it. These are neurotoxic herbs. And so all of the animals, that have seizures or in a family with a family history or breed history of seizures, we don't use rosemary, fennel, oregano, or sage in anything they eat.
Because that can lead to seizures.
Yes, and
Yeah,
absolutely.
I've heard that about
Yeah,
rosemary and sage.
of it, and you're in big trouble.
Rosemary, sage, and what? And then you said fennel.
Rosemary, oregano, fennel, and sage. And fennel is the strongest.
Okay, Lori can probably type that out so we can do that. Thomas Clark asks, "What about dry food? Is that good for them?"
It depends. I mean, obviously, fresh homemade food is the healthiest thing you can have for yourself and for your special friend. Dry kibbles are fine. We absolutely prefer grain-free, and that information about the risk for grain-free boutique beg diets has been disproven. The FDA and other experts have shown now that there's a genetic predisposition for canine heart disease and canine cardiomyopathy, but it's all the environmental factors that cause it to be expressed. And remember, 2 to 3% of our genome is the actual genes we carry, whether we're a dog, a cat, or a person. The rest of it, 97 to 98%, is the epigenome. Those are the things that cause your genes to express health or disease. And that's pollution, depletion of the ozone layer. It's all the chemicals and things that we're putting all around our environment. Why do you think disease is 4 to 5 times more prevalent than it used to be in people and animals 10 years ago?
Yeah. It's interesting because people think, oh, it just we have more we know more, like we're researching more, and so doctors are finding the cancers more. And it's interesting. I did a podcast a while back with a wolf expert, and he said that wolves live in the wild about 7 years, and in captivity, if they're fed their natural species appropriate diet, they can live to 15 years in captivity. And so I asked him, why, when you find the wolves and they die, what are they dying from? Well, humans kill them is the number one thing that kills wolves. Number 2 was that they hunt and they grind down their teeth and then they starve to death. But what they didn't find was any dogs or wolves dying from cancer. So they didn't have any cancers. And so it really makes you start thinking, if we control the things we can control, how much more we can do. Of course, wolves are also susceptible to the ozone layer being depleted, and our earth and our soils are changing, but we're not drenching flea and tick medication on them. We're not over vaccinating them. We aren't feeding them poor diets, those things. And so that's what the show is really all about too, is us, speaking with veterinarians like yourself to help us have a better understanding of the things we can control, we should control, because there's a whole bunch of them we can't control. Genetics, like you're saying, and stuff. So
global warming, and you're 100% correct. Absolutely.
So Thomas asks a question. He's just kind of somebody that I've met just recently, and he's learning so much through some pretty scary stuff that went through with his dog. And so now he's going to learn a whole bunch. But he says our vet put Lula, the mom of his dog, on diabetic food. Do you think that that's a good idea for her? She's blind now.
What's good for her when she's blind? I'm sorry.
She's on diabetic food. Is that a Thomas? Is that a prescription diet food? I just want to give Dr. Dodds a little bit more information so she can respond. He says that she went blind from the insulin.
Well, that's really strange. It depends on what kind of insulin. Tom, the best way I can help you is if you send me an email, and and with as much information as you have, and I'll be happy to make some recommendations. Quotes, diabetic food is not necessarily the best thing, okay? And depending on the size of your dog, we can figure out whether you can home cook or I can make a special recipe for you that will help everything, okay?
Yeah. That's good. That's good to know. Thomas, I think you'll learn both from Dr. Dodds and myself. We're big supporters of home cooking diets and creating whole fresh food diets. I don't
Right.
think, you already heard Dr. Dodds say kibble, dry food is okay, but I think we're both going to try to help you get a little bit of fresh food in there. It's hard. He has big dogs. And that's one of the things it can be very expensive if you have giant animals to feed and stuff. So, but diet, not necessarily, your response was not necessarily diabetic food, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah. There's a lot of,
Because
yeah.
we find out.
Yeah. I think probably what he's talking about is, prescription diets would be my guess, since the vet gave it to him. So that'll lead me to this question that might help Thomas as well. Is there anything in any prescription food that you know of that actually has something in it that would be defined as a prescription, meaning something I couldn't get at the grocery store if I wanted to make my own food and use that label to follow?
Not necessarily. You should be able to mirror what's in the quotes prescription diets pretty well.
Yeah.
Basically, they've evolved because it's convenient for us, just like fast foods have evolved for ourselves, because home cooking is just a lot more work. And if you have a big dog, it's going to be very expensive. But there are ways to get premixes of good grain-free vegetables and fruit, to which you just have to add a topper, and that makes it, of a special meat or fish, depending on the situation, and that
Right.
makes it affordable. So, I mean, for me, well, the biggest problem that people don't understand, remember, veterinarians are not taught this, okay? So they're being sponsored by the pet food industry, which is their job, okay, to sell pet food. Veterinarians don't know this, and even when they go to continuing education, they're often sponsored by one of the major pharma or pet food industry groups. And we just have to remember that their job is to sell a product. We have to decide whether it's the right product for our particular patient or client. So, biggest problem we have is with these quotes hydrolyzed, hypoallergenic, high profile commercial foods. Hydrolyzed foods, by the way, can't possibly cause a sensitivity or intolerance or allergy after all. Well, then how the heck can they be nutritious? Come on. What you do with a hydrolyzed or quotes hypoallergenic diet is you open up the whole protein and you have more antigenic sites involved so that the animal can tolerate it better. When you look at the effects of those diets in terms of the frequency of adverse reactions, it's about 4-fold less than the offending food that hadn't been hydrolyzed. And it's a little bit less reactive, but it's still reactive, and it's still causing problems and still stimulate the immune system. So
Yeah.
there are a couple that are pretty good, but most of them are not defensible. And people say, well, I can't feed my dog chicken because it's a pro-inflammatory hot food in Chinese medicine, but my food has chicken fat. And when I called the company, they said there's no protein in fat. I said, since when is the fat isolated from a chicken go through high liquid chromatography, sterilization, and purification? Of course there's protein in fat.
Yeah.
So you
Crazy.
can't have chicken if you can't have chicken.
I have so many clients, dogs that are on hydrolyzed proteins, and the dogs are in the same. Nothing's changed, except they're paying a higher vet bill, and the animal's still having some other problems. But then what I've noticed a lot is they get on these for allergies, but then I start to notice arthritis setting in, joint problems, weight gain. They try to solve one problem, but then a whole bunch of other problems come about. So it's kind of sad that happens. And that's what I don't think happens with food. When you do a whole fresh food diet and you understand, you can feed a diabetic animal, right, a whole fresh food diet, and you won't, if you do it and you understand, you're not doing processed stuff or putting in supplements and doing all this stuff, you're not going to have other problems from that food. So that's one of the things why I started studying nutrition when I left the veterinary field. So Sally came on here, and I think I lost her. Oh, there it is. She says she has a 22-year-old cat. Congratulations, Sally. That's awesome.
Oh,
Isn't that great? Living a great life. I know Sally knows a lot about species appropriate raw diet. So her cat eats a raw, no bone in rabbit, turkey, and pork human grade recipe. And her cat has CKD and HT. What do you think about that, Dr. Dodds?
Well, how are you controlling the hyperthyroidism is the question I would ask.
Yeah.
Doing it with medication? Are you doing it by diet? How are we doing that? And I think what you're doing is marvelous. I mean, those meats are perfect. They should be great.
Yeah, she'll probably let us know how she's dealing with the hyperthyroidism. I don't know if she's doing. Dr. Jean Dodds is an expert in thyroid, also, correct?
Correct.
So if you have questions about your dog's thyroid, this
Or
is
cat. Yeah.
or cat. I'm sorry, yeah, or your cat. I don't know why I do that.
Email, no problem. info@hemopet.org, and just put "for me" in the subject line, and I'll be more than happy to help you.
This is awesome. A special diet brand bring. Thomas says at first his critical something doctor didn't believe that special diet bring up his anemia. Sorry, Thomas. So that one's a hard one for me to kind of read through. Let's try typing that again. Let's go a little bit though. Dr. Dodds, I'm excited to learn this with you. So I'm hoping that everybody else will be excited. But Dr. Dodds has a new product that she has put her name on. And my understanding is she's never put her name on anything before. So just knowing that gets me a little bit excited because, you know, it is so important that we reach out and understand what we can do with nutrition and health. And sometimes our animals won't eat what we want them to eat. And so we have to gravitate a little bit towards supplements. But tell us a little bit about this product because I'm excited and what it's for.
The product is called BioBlend Super 6. It's only available from Hemopet. It's a powder. It's tasty. It's got a mixed berry flavor, and you can give it to the animal by mouth or mix it in the food. Now, why do we develop this? Well, first of all, we're trying to control in people and animals oxidative stress of our cells. In the mammalian body, about 25% of our cells are dying and being replenished all the time. Okay. When you have oxidative stress with infection, inflammation, obesity, periodontal disease, and precancer, 75% of our cells are undergoing death and destruction and having to be cleared, right, by the body. They have to be detoxed. So the question is, how do you reduce that? And so we have 2 patents now for the dog on the technology to identify those animals that have high biomarkers of oxidative stress, because we want to prevent inflammation, infection, obesity, periodontal disease, and certain cancers. Okay, we developed these with our colleague in Oxford, Michigan, Dr. Calloward, Dennis Calloward, and we have these 2 patents now. And we decided then that we would develop a super supplement at Hemopet, put my name on it as an adjunct to the standard vitamin and minerals that you may be giving your pet anyway with the food and whatever. And what it will do is we'll reduce it. And we've done clinical trials now. We have 10 clinical trial patients where the biomarkers were really high. The normal range is 0.5 to 1.75 nanograms per mil in saliva. These are saliva tests that people can easily do themselves rather than having to take blood, okay? The blood tests are not reliable for food intolerance.
So the bio test that you're talking about is a saliva test to check their
like Nutriscan, saliva. And
okay.
In people and animals, you cannot do food intolerance sensitivity testing accurately in blood, even though many veterinary companies sell food allergy tests on serum. They are not valid, okay, not clinically proven. So our testing is clinically proven. So we did the 10 clinical trials. And as I said, the upper limit of the normal range on this particular enzyme is 1.75 nanograms per mil. We started with people that had 3 and 4 and 5. And within 5 months on our supplement, it came down to 0.7.
Wow.
What happens is, now it takes 5 months. No, you see the change in your pet right away. So the people knew that the pet was suddenly feeling better. They had not as much gas, not as much diarrhea, not as much constipation, not as much just stress. You know, they had a dull eye. They were just not happy. You could see, and they had abdominal discomfort. And the people could see within 10 days on the supplement that their
Wow.
animals were feeling so much better. And so
Wow.
then, of course, the actual change in the level in the saliva took, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever. And then you stay on the supplement as long as you can for life, basically, because it's giving you beneficial microbiome. The bacteria in the bowel are healthy and disease preventing as opposed to harmful. It's
So
so amazing.
but it's different than it's not a probiotic. It's
No, actually, it has both pre and probiotics.
what are in
It's a
it.
total biotic.
It's a what?
It's a total biotic. It takes dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the bowel, right?
Uh-huh.
DYS, to
Yeah.
produce rebiosis, regeneration, and symbiosis, which is synergy, balance. It's
Wow.
amazing.
Okay.
And so our patent is pending now on the actual formula for BioBlend Super 6.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to start because we're so local. I'm hoping I'm going to try to get some of my clients to, try it so we can see. Because I see some difficult cases. I see dogs in all the time, and I see I have one right now, in fact, that I'm really struggling with, and we've tried diet changes and we've done all sorts of stuff, but she's just struggling. So maybe this will be the ticket, and maybe I can let her be a little sample.
If you go on our website,
what is it called again?
BioBlend Super 6.
Okay.
You go on the website, hemopet.org, and on the head banners, amongst other things, you'll see BioBlend. Just click on that. It'll tell you how to get it, what the price is, what the dose is per body weight of the pet. And then you can click on one of the links and it'll give you all of the data we talked about.
Were there any, when you were doing the studies with the dogs, was there any specific things you were going after targeting that you were able to, like arthritis? I know it sounds a lot about IBD and those kind of things, but were there any other kind of surprises in that?
Absolutely. It helps the skin, it helps the hair coat, helps the joints, it helps the bones, it helps the bowel, and it helps the brain.
Yeah, we are seeing so many dogs with dementia. I mean, it's like never before. I've seen, I've been working with animals for 37 years now. And yeah, they would get old and die, but the dementia, it's just so many are coming in and they just don't know what's going on. And I don't know if it's because I just don't know. I mean, I've never seen dogs, quite this many of them with dementia. So that would be really interesting to use that for a dog or a cat with dementia.
Combine it, Carrie, with a proper diet, not over vaccination, sure. Other chemical flea and ticks, and you don't want Roundup sprayed around, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And the food sensitivity testing. I mean, people say, well, I did NutriScan and my dog reacted to rabbit, and he's never eaten rabbit. I said, do you go to the park? Do you have rabbits? And oh my God, we have a bunny and her babies under the back porch. My dog is eating rabbit poop.
Of course. I know. That's the thing, is a lot of times people just don't.
No, she was so happy. She figured it out.
She figured it out. Yeah, exactly. She figured it out. That's got to be what it is. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to start doing this show, is because sometimes it's just stuff that you weren't thinking. And then you put a bunch of people together and all of a sudden you just go, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? How did I even miss that? Thomas and his wife were on a podcast I did a while back talking about the story of their dog. And she's just amazing because she started noticing that the dogs started licking their tile in the house, and it was a new thing. And she just started thinking it was because the dog was anemic. She didn't really know. She has some background in nursing, but she pushed the vet and said, I think the dog's anemic. And it was, whether that was the reason that he was anemic, or the reason that he was anemic was why he was licking it or not, it still made her think something's different. My dog doesn't lick tile. So when we just kind of sit back for a little bit and think about all the different things, like, the rabbit poop.
Yeah, pica. Now, just remember that many veterinarians will say your pet is anemic, so you need to take iron.
Yeah.
You got to be careful there, because iron doesn't work in anemia unless it also has enough vitamin B12 and folic acid, because it doesn't mature. The red cells don't mature with iron alone. And also, if you give too much iron, if you're feeding, say, a raw red meat diet mostly, you can end up with having hemoglobin pigment in the liver and spleen. It's called hemosiderosis. You don't want that either. So you don't
Wow.
want an excess of anything or a deficiency of anything. You want a balance.
Yeah, balance is one thing that I talk about a lot, and people are always surprised when I tell them, I do a lot with my animals that is balance over time. I do some fasting. I try to mimic their diet naturally that would be what was available to them. And the reason why I do fasting is because I'm not really sure. I mean, I have now I have 5 animals, 3 cats and 2 dogs.
Erica used to do that. You fast an animal once a week. Remember, she used to say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and that's what I do. And I fast them. Some days I just give them just veggies, and some days I will do a fast on them completely, because it is a little like making sure and I know kibble says it's complete and balanced, but even that, I'm like, how would you know? You don't know how much my dog runs or doesn't run, or his metabolism or her metabolism. So balance over time has always been something that I've been really a supporter of, is understanding that. I feel like we do that with our own diets. We don't eat the same thing every day. Going back to the bio blend, I just want to make sure, because you told me a little bit about this before we went live, and you mentioned the one supplement you do not want to be taking in addition to the bio blend.
Yeah, you don't want to be giving, in addition to a standard vitamin and mineral, which is fine, you don't want to give extra mega doses of vitamin D3. BioBlend Super 6 has D3 in it for its immune balancing and all the other beneficial things it does. So if you're doing extra vitamin D3, then you just reduce it to 50% of it or whatever, if you're doing BioBlend, which is much more balanced than just D3 alone, of course.
Yeah. And what would be the risks of too much vitamin D?
Well, you get calcinosis, you get calcium deposits, and it can harm, well, the joints, it can harm the kidneys, it can harm the organs, it can produce all kinds of adverse things. That's been a big issue with SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, a subject that I also teach by public health, by the way, because that was my training in New York. That we don't want to give too much of anything. And the question is D3 important? Is interferon important? Is ivermectin important to keep the immune system optimally working? And all of those can be important in the appropriate dosing.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up is because, with the access that we have and through Facebook, and there's all these companies that want to sell the miracle drug that you can, or miracle herb, or whatever you want to call it, that's going to save all, like we saw with CBD, right? And then I have people board with me that bring me piles of holistic stuff. I mean, here he gets all of this every day. And you have to be careful, because even though it's still just it's a vitamin, or it's a mineral, or it's an herb, you can still overdo it. So,
yeah,
and
vitamin
D is one of them.
Right. Some of the things have the same things and there's something else. We had a lady come with a shopping bag full of supplements, and we made her on our reception desk put them all on the desk in a row by size.
Oh, geez.
Okay? The smallest one to the largest. So I looked at her, I said, okay, we're going to throw away a third of them. Do you want me to pick the third, or do you want to just take every other one? She got the message right away.
Yeah, you have to be careful. I mean, if you're not, and so I'm really happy to hear you talking about this is a great supplement. I just don't want you to be giving double the dose of vitamin D. We learned that if you follow if you follow one of the Facebook groups that I'm an admin for, which is Saving Pets One Pet at a Time, so many dogs died from a double dose of vitamin D. So you really want to be careful with that. Okay, Thomas asked that. So too much vitamin D is what killed dogs that were eating Hill's Science diet. Sally mentions that. And she's not wrong. And the FDA came out and said that they were responsible for the double dose of vitamin D, and they paid out pennies, in my opinion, to the people who lost their animals. But that was from overdosing in vitamin D. So it's important. Our dogs need to have vitamin D. I've had many dogs I've sent. In fact, one of them I sent to you for some blood work, and it came back with his vitamin D levels too low. So those are important too, is getting these blood work and knowing where you are, right? And following that.
Yes, you can. Excellent laboratories that measure them in Southern California. We use them regularly. vitamin D and the other supplements to see where we are and whether the animal needs to be boosted in one and not another, you know?
Right, right, right. So what else has been going on? Let's talk a little bit. We talked a little bit about rabies, I know, and we talked about flea and tick medications and those kind of things. What about, I know I always talk to you about vaccines because it's an interesting topic to me, and one I fight with. As a boarding facility, I don't require the Bordetella vaccine. But can you kind of explain the different, maybe we should do this by explaining the difference between no vaccines and doing some vaccines, and your viewpoint on that. Because a lot of times people think that because I don't require the Bordetella vaccine to board, that I am against all vaccines. And before I let you answer that, I just want to tell everyone I have seen dogs die from Parvo back as a vet tech, and I am not against the Parvo vaccine. But can you tell us the difference between those vaccines maybe, and help people understand?
Yeah, the biggest issue today is that vaccines are safe and efficacious generally. We're over vaccinating, however, and we also have the problem with adverse reactions. Now, not to give any vaccines to a pet, dog or cat or horse or whatever, is totally irresponsible, just as it would be to be an anti-vaxxer against SARS-CoV-2. It's basically insane. That's not a good idea. What we have to do is you have to look at where you live and the lifestyle of the particular animal. Are you out hunting? Are you out walking in slow-moving streams? Whatever you do. I'm not criticizing whatever your lifestyle is, but you need to know that. Then you need to know what are the clinically important proven diseases in the area that you live in. For example, for the dog, it would have to be distemper and parvovirus. Absolutely. Parvovirus being much more prevalent and much more dangerous, endemic, than would be canine distemper. Excuse me. However, canine distemper is still prevalent in wildlife. So you have to be careful if you're doing a lifestyle where you do that. So what do? You don't over vaccinate. You give the key core vaccines. And by the way, the National Veterinary Association, the International Veterinary Associations list hepatitis as in the core. We do not believe that that's a good idea, because if you put hepatitis and distemper and parvo together in a young puppy, you suppress the immune system, specifically the cell-mediated immunity. And that's work from Tom Phillips and Ron Schultz from Scripps from years ago. And what it is it suppresses it for 10 days. Why would you want to suppress the immune function and stability of the immune system in a puppy, for example, when it's going to a new home, it's got the stress of travel, it's getting a new diet, it's getting a new environment? That's the worst time to do it. Now, if you're going to an area where there is hepatitis, for example, you can give that later on in life. Now, there's a good thing about that, Carrie. The Bordetella vaccines are an example in point. Injectable Bordetella does not stimulate the patient's interferon, so you get no cross protection against the kennel cough complex. Okay? Intranasal Bordetella releases interferon and cross protects against all the rest of the kennel cough, including adenovirus 2, which is hepatitis. So you get a cross reaction. But the intranasal vaccine can spray around the eyes, and anybody being near that pet when it gets an intranasal vaccine, especially if it sneezes, is going to get sprayed as well. Do you want that? No. What we do now is we use the oral Bordetella, which is put into the mouth. It has the same beneficial effect, releases interferon. You get cross protection for all the other upper respiratory viruses, including hepatitis. So you don't have to put hepatitis by injection. You can use just distemper and parvo. It's totally amazing. Now, what about leptospirosis? You know, there's a leptospirosis scare right now by the public health department.
I know.
Yes, in Orange County and in LA County both. Now, the problem isn't that simple. First of all, leptospirosis is a reportable zoonotic disease, meaning people can get it and animals can get it, okay? So if there's a documented case now, not a belief, an actual documented case of leptospirosis proven by the appropriate antigen testing, polymerase chain reaction, not antibody measurements, because you can be exposed and produce an antibody you've never had the disease, okay? You've brushed it off because your body produced an immune response. Okay, If it's reportable and it's one of the serovar strains of lepto that's in the vaccine, then you can vaccinate. But most of them are not. There's only 4 serovars of lepto, and there's 7 clinically important strains in Southern California. There's 200 strains of leptospirosis, by the way, totally.
Jeez.
So the 7 are important. But if it's not one of the 4 that are in the vaccines, vaccinating over and over for lepto isn't going to help you. And it's the second most likely vaccines to produce hypersensitivity after rabies. So why would you do it?
Yeah. And if your pet gets lepto, how could you get rid of it?
Well, it's pretty hard to do that because it can last for 3 to 6 months minimum, but it's also extremely antibiotic sensitive. So what happens is if your animal's ADR ain't doing right? You go to your veterinarian for a checkup. You tell them that you've recently been around where there's cattle and swine and other things and you're concerned. And the veterinarian says, well, we need to do a proven polymerase chain reaction test for lepto for all the strains, those 7. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you antibiotic like doxycycline or amoxicillin. Within 24 hours, the organism's going to be killed. So you wait, and the results from the lab come back in 3 to 5 days or whatever. And if you don't need it, you continue the antibiotic for 5 to 7 days so you don't promote resistant strains, and you can stop it. If it's positive, you continue the antibiotic for, say, 21 days. Same for Lyme disease.
Yeah. What do you
so
think?
There's a way to do this that's
A safer way. A safer
us.
way. What do you think the likelihood of, because one of the things I try to teach pet parents is what you hit the nail on the head. Every dog is different, but most traditional veterinarians set up their protocol for every dog that comes in gets the exact, because it's faster, it's easier. I don't have time to find out whether you're going hiking in the mountains or swimming in the rivers, and so I'll just give everybody the same vaccine and the same flea and tick and the same food and the same this, and we go on and on. So, but let's look at lepto for an example. What do you think the likelihood of a dog who lives in someone's home, who doesn't go to doggy daycares, who doesn't really even much go for walks other than in their backyard, eats a healthy diet, and what do you think the likelihood is? No rats are hanging out. There's no wildlife in their backyard. What are the odds that they would even get leptospirosis?
Basically 0, or as Dr. Schultz would say, de minimis. Even though
retired, he's a vet I wish I would have met.
Around the Great Lakes where they're from in Wisconsin, there was a significant exposure risk to lepto. And he said, no, we don't do that. Yeah. We check the testing, and then we treat if necessary for a few days with antibiotic until we get the results back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to me because I wonder, because you would think that wolves and coyotes, they're drinking out of rivers and lakes and streams and all sorts of stuff, that they would be picking that up. But I always have wondered, their diets, probably their stomach acids and the amount of raw diet that they're eating probably just helps shed it off, right?
Right. But all of those help us, survive and not be infected with infectious diseases.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, but learning all of so when we talk about vaccines and we talk about over vaccinating our dogs, does that mean, like, how would you describe that? Like giving them too much in one time or giving them too much over time?
All of the above. So what you do is you follow your appropriate puppy or kitten series, right? A year later, that's not at year of age, but a year later, you can do a vaccine serum antibody titer to see if giving the vaccine doesn't mean the pet was immunized, right?
Right. And that's what people don't realize. That's why I don't let people come to me for 2 weeks. I said, you can't vaccinate today and then drop off for boarding in 4 hours.
Yeah, no, you can't. So the question is, they received the vaccine, but did it immunize? Okay. Right. So then you can do that. Some people will say, just give me one more booster of the minimum dose, Dr. Dodds, a year after the puppy series was completed. And then after that, every 3 years, we do a titer. Okay. We do a blood test. Some people say, well, I don't want that. It's just difficult. Just give me another booster. If you want to give another booster with informed consent, you could do it every 3 years. The vaccines are labeled every 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and you make sure that they're mercury free and aluminum free and whatever. And there's lots of vaccines that are available now that are carefully done that you can use that with, and they're safe.
That's one of the reasons why you would want to go to a holistic veterinarian. Let me just back up because, and first and foremost, all holistic veterinarians get their degrees and licensing through traditional veterinary medicine schools. There's not two different schools, right? Like you went to
Exactly this. Right.
right, you go to veterinary school like everybody else, and then usually from my speaking with lots of holistic veterinarians, somewhere along the line they go, well, this isn't working. These dogs keep getting sick. And so they
Right.
start to, really good veterinarians will start to go, oh, wait a second, I need to learn something else. They either learn under someone like most of the vets that I know have learned from you being their mentor and learning from you. And some have gone on to holistic places like maybe Dr. Pitcairn offers a lot of homeopathic schools that you can go to continue your education. Dr. Barbara Royal has an academy in Chicago where you can go. So I always want to point that out because a holistic veterinarian is a veterinarian. Sometimes people think they're two, different things. They're not. It's just, to me, it's a little bit more. But the important reason why you want to go to a holistic vet is because they will have those vaccines that are mercury free and not have all of that in there. And so
Right.
if you find a good holistic veterinarian, and you got to be careful, right? Because you and Dr. Dodds and I know we've had people say I'm a holistic, and then we're like, no, that's not. You're not.
Yeah, the vaccines that don't have mercury are called thimerosal free, and they're labeled as TF. So the company will produce a vaccine that's a regular one, and they'll put the same vaccine in that has TF either before or after it. That's the one you want. And it was in 1977, Carrie, when I decided with all of my studies on vaccinations that we weren't doing this right, that the Holistic Veterinary Medical Association, before it actually formed an actual association, invited me to talk about vaccinosis. And we were in a Holiday Inn with those horrible long orange shag rugs. I can't think of all the bugs that must have been growing in that rug.
Ugh.
And I remember standing there and looking at these people, and I felt totally humiliated. I said, oh my God, I hope you understand that I want to keep a hand in both camps, science and holistic medicine. But
Yeah.
I was sure that you guys would wear sandals and beads and ponchos and have weird hairdos and maybe have earrings and all that stuff.
Burning incense.
And so they started laughing. One guy jumped up and said, here's my thong. The other one said, here's my poncho. The third one said, here are my beads. And I said, I love you.
Yeah.
That's how I became a holistic veterinarian.
Yeah. I remember the first convention I went to. I always tell people this was many years ago. And it felt like it was just like a huge relief that I wasn't crazy. Like I thought, God, if people find out that I am holistic, they're going to think that I think I can solve a broken leg by burning crystals and chanting. And that's not what
work.
Huh? What?
No, I said you tried that and it didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. Exactly. So, but holistic to me means understanding the whole of everything and understanding about the cause, because I think a lot of times traditional veterinary medicine, they are adamant about making it go away right now, the quickest way they can. And that happens to be this drug that I have on the counter. And because that's what A equals B is supposed to be. And usually those end up in a worse place. But Sally says immunization is the goal, but not over vaccine. You're exactly right.
100%.
It is. She says it. Haha. They call this meeting your tribe. She's talking about when I went to, and you and I, when it was meeting my tribe. I'm going to use that forever now, Sally. Thanks. I was absolutely meeting my tribe, and it felt so good because I just thought I wanted to hug everybody the whole weekend. I was like, oh, there's a lot of us that are, smart people, really smart, educated people. We're not, so many doctors there, and it was amazing. So I'm so excited about doing this every Wednesday and having all of the vets like yourself come on and help educate us. And And I'm just excited. And I don't know if there's any last questions, but I don't want to keep Dr. Dodds too long, and we're coming up because I'd keep you forever because I'm just so. Oh, you know what? I do have one question. I do have one question for you. In your vaccine protocol that you talk about starting the puppies out, I think it's 8 weeks, right? Their first vaccine.
Preferably 9. Wait, yeah.
You broke up. What did you say?
8 is okay, but preferably 9 to 10 for the first dose
9 to
if you
10.
can wait. Yeah.
Well, somebody contacted me and asked me, because I've learned through you and most of us have, is that they have immunity from their mother up until they're 16 weeks, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain why we would vaccinate before 16 weeks if they have immunity until they're 16 weeks?
Well, they don't have a full immunity. The immunity, first of all, they have to have had colostrum or plasma injections, as newborn in order to get the antibodies from their mother. Those start waning, okay, and they're gone by 14 to 16 weeks typically. Now, if you're in a parvovirus epidemic, which comes periodically, you can give a single parvo at 6 weeks, but not before that. And we have breeders buying the vaccine and giving it at 4 weeks. You can't do that. You'll screw up the immune system and you'll neutralize whatever's going on. So the vaccine too young will neutralize the antibodies they got from their mother. So
Wow.
You won't want to start before 8 weeks, and depending on the situation, between 9 and 10 weeks for the first one. And then you do the second one between 14 and 16. And then all we do is we give a single parvo again at 18. Why? Because Dr. Schultz showed that some animals still have poor protection after 16 weeks. And if you do 18 weeks, you'll get, so you can do 9, just as an example, 9 to 10, 14 to 16, and 18. And then rabies by law has to be given by 6 months. So you never give it together. People go in to see a veterinarian, they get the combo wombo plus rabies at the same time and lepto, and the animals collapsed, right? So you give the rabies between 20 and 24 weeks, and only one labeled TF without mercury. So you're giving it separately because remember, it's a very strong antigen and it's made to protect against this fatal disease. So you don't want to give it with any other vaccine.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is having people understand that vets are often choosing what they're giving your pets based on convenience, not just for them, but for you, because they don't want you to have to come back. And
they perceive that the people don't want to do it.
Right.
Oh, but Dr. Dodds, I can't go back 4 times. It's going to cost me so much. Veterinarians that are enlightened will say, Mrs. Jones, you can have the whole package done the appropriate way for X dollars, or you can come in and get everything done at once for the same X dollars.
Yeah.
In other words, you mark up the cost of the combo wombo because you're going to have to deal with what happens.
Oh my gosh, I know. If I had, this is, and everybody who's listening, please know I am hypothetically asking about a hypothetical dog, because the answer, anything that Dr. Dodds or any of the vets on here say, I say, don't take it straight to your dog. There's so many variables that play: age, weight, food, location that they're living. There's so much stuff. We're here to help you. You can contact Dr. Dodds. We've put all of her information up for you to get a hold of her. But before you make any hard and fast decisions based on something that we've said on this show, please make sure you give us more information about your dog before you do that. But this question I want to ask you is, if I had a puppy, and I don't, my dogs are old, but if I had a puppy and I'm going to I get her from the breeder at, let's say I get her from a bad breeder and I get her at 6 weeks. And I have a 6-week-old puppy who's been nursing off of her mom until she's 6 weeks old. But I'm going to bring her into my home and she's not going anywhere. She's not going to be exposed to anybody. I'm not going to be exposed. I don't work around dogs in this hypothetical situation. Could I wait till she was 16 weeks to give her that Parvo vaccine? Or do you think
I would
you
give
wouldn't?
one before that. Yeah,
Just
I'd give one at 10. Yeah, it has to be 3 to 4 weeks apart, according to the label, to be effective.
Sure.
And those licensed Parvo vaccines require 2 doses to immunize 3 to 4 weeks apart. So just giving one, even though Dr. Schultz, before he retired, said, oh, you could give one at 20 weeks and you don't need a second one. That's not what the manufacturers recommend. So you don't have any back proof to support
Right.
you if something goes wrong. So you would give one, say at 11 weeks maybe, and another one 3 to 4 weeks later, and then you're done.
Can you titer in between there? Can you do a
No,
vaccine?
no,
No.
because you, the titer will be positive for 3 weeks after the vaccination, okay?
Uh-huh.
Because of what's going on, okay, from the stimulus, from the immunity. So you don't know what the real titer is. You have to wait at least 3 weeks after the last booster before you titer, and
Before
the
you
puppy
titer.
should be at least 16 weeks old. So you're looking at titers from 16 to say 19 or 20 weeks typically, if you
How
want
do
to do that.
How do you feel about giving a parvo vaccine to a 10-year-old dog who has had vaccines his whole life? Giving the dog a parvo test or parvo vaccine?
97% of dogs that have been properly immunized will never need another vaccine.
Yeah.
That's based on published data of my own, actually.
So if they were to get their last one, you said at 20 weeks, you said?
Yeah.
And then not another one, you don't think, for the rest of their life?
Well, for parvo, it depends. It depends on whether you've got, see, it's still parvo 2C that everybody's got now, but we have mutations that can occur. So
Right.
you might want to do one time in midlife. We tell people that come to our holistic clinic that they can titer every 3 years, but we don't vaccinate after 10. Now, if it's a Yorkie and lives to 20, we might change that to 12, okay? But for a
Yeah.
big dog, especially, you're not going to vaccinate after age 10, other than rabies by law,
Sure.
unless you get an
Sure.
exemption for a specific medical reason or
Sure.
deferral.
I just asked this because, I own I own the boarding facility. And so I have all these dogs that are just so old and they just keep getting these parvo vaccines. And even for my license, it's not required. I don't have to. And I just think, God, your dog is just so old that he's not going to get parvo. He's just not going to
Right.
get it.
They don't need
So,
it. And you just need informed consent, Carrie.
sure.
It can be oral or written. It can be an oral informed consent with the pet caregiver there, and just make
Yeah.
a note on the chart when you take the dog in for boarding that,
Yeah.
and they see that you've done that. It doesn't have to be written. It can be an oral initialed or a written informed consent. And sometimes your staff, when the people are checking in, you can
Yeah.
have this kind of information available into a short paragraph handout for them to read, right, while they're
Yeah.
waiting for you to take the animal into the facility.
Yeah, we do. I should do a handout. We started doing orientations now, trying to help people understand a little bit about, because I've been considered an anti-vaxxer. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I've seen dogs die from parvo. I'm not that. I just don't think we should be giving, a Bordetella and a lepto and a this and a that and a da, 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 every 3 months or 6 months or whatever the places are deciding to do now, because it's all over the page.
Do people really think that the only thing in there is the antigen they're vaccinating against? You've got fetal calf serum, you've got immune stimulants, you've got serotonin and other histamines that are released from the cells that they grow the tissue culture in. I mean, look at the fact that we had a cat vaccine that was made years ago on kidney tissue cells, and the cats got kidney failure from it because they were being immunized against kidney protein as well
Is it?
as.
Do you think it's true? I mean, I've heard this, but I didn't go to vet school, so I don't want to ever be the person who says something is true that I didn't see for myself. But is it true that they taught veterinarians to give the rabies vaccine in the back of a cat's leg in case it got cancer, they could amputate?
Or on the tail. Mm-hmm. So you could chop it off.
I
Well,
heard it. I heard it.
Yeah,
And
we
I
got
just,
so much vaccine-induced sarcomas that, and if you remove them, they come back again. They didn't know what to do. So the powers that be thought, oh, well, we'll just chop off that part of the body where we give it.
so they would I never heard they immunized through the tail even so they could amputate.
The tail or the hind leg. Mm-hmm. Well, some cats have a tail, so that's why
Right,
they had, yeah.
right, right.
But only,
Yours.
hey, now only if they got a tumor. You don't take off the leg otherwise. I know, not recommended.
I so enjoy speaking with you, and I hope all of our listeners, you guys just got enlightened yourselves, because Dr. Dodds is just so amazing. She's been, like I said, a mentor to so many of the veterinarians that you're probably following and learning about. And this is most of those vets, this is who they talk to. We all look up to you so much for all of your information and your studies and your ability to just keep on speaking up and saying, no, enough's enough. I love how adamant you are about flea and tick now. It's just how many animals do we have to see die and have seizures and be rushed to the animal? How many before we say enough's enough, and I'm with you. I hate that stuff. I want nothing to do with it. I refuse. I won't even people bring me it all the time because their dogs are getting groomed with us and they say, oh, just put this on. And oh no, I won't. I can't even put it on their dog. No. So
Understood.
I love that. And you're just amazing. Thank you for being on here. I'm hoping we'll see you in a couple of weeks whenever you're ready. Every Wednesday we're here. So just pop on whenever you want.
Good.
Everybody else, I don't know, Dr. Dodds, is there anything else you want to say, last minute things?
No, I just love you all, and be transparent and share and take care of each other.
Oh, thank you. That's awesome that you just said that. That's amazing. It's true. Take care of each other. Be transparent. Awesome words of advice. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and head off of here. Lori is behind the scenes making sure she types everything so she got the name of that supplement. Are you calling it a supplement? Is that fair to call it a supplement?
Supplement. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So all of that is typed in. You know how to get a hold of Dr. Dodds if you need to. You know how to get a hold of me if you need to. Take care of your pups and your kitties, everybody. They only have you to make their decisions. Make sure they're good ones. And we're here to guide you. Take care, everybody.
Amen. Bye-bye.
Bye.